Is it on, Ryan? All right, let me get my camera turned down here. That's better. Gonna have to relax. Hope you guys are all doing good this evening. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday evening. I got a hold of Ryan a while ago, and I'm like, we just haven't had a good old-fashioned Facebook Live lately to talk about all the issues we've got going on. So that's what I told him I wanted to do. I got my list here in my left hand, and I've got my handy dandy bourbon in my right hand. I'm like Justice Kavanaugh. Remember when they treated him so bad when he was trying to get confirmed about liking beer, and he finally just said, "I like beer." It was kind of funny. So let me get my list. Let's start talking. Let's talk a little bit first about the cases with the masks and the exclusion for the children. Okay, there, at least in some parts of the state, there appears to be some confusion. So with the parents and the kids, with the masking and the exclusion, there is no school district in the state right now that has a universal masking policy. And a couple of parents in the state seem to be confused, not many, but a few, on what that means. I thought it was fairly obvious. Is that if your child is not walking in the school building at 8 o'clock in the morning and every one of them in the school has to put a mask on, that's universal masking. Okay, doesn't matter what, anything else, put it on when you walk in the door, leave it on all day. There's not a school in the state that's doing that district wide or school building wide right now. Doesn't exist. And so the fact that that doesn't exist, many, if most of these school districts in these cases have come to court to the judge saying we don't have a universal masking policy. Not only that, they no longer have an exclusion policy, which means if your child was some close contact, which is, I understand, a very sensitive conversation, your kid has to leave the school for 10 days or 14 days or whatever the recipe of the week is from the CDC. That doesn't exist anywhere in any school either. Those were the main things we were arguing about with the judge this whole time. A universal mask policy and a blanket exclusion policy because of close contact. Doesn't exist anymore. What we have now is a very small group of school districts. When I say very small, you can count them on one hand and have fingers left over, that have chose to try to incorporate this guidance, and it's just guidance. It's not authoritative. The school districts can't rely upon it. They're trying to say they have their own ability internally to do a couple of things. One is if a child tests positive, actually tests positive, that child is going to be excluded from school for 5 days and then wear a mask 6 through 10. That is different than anything they've ever done before. Whether that particular policy is lawful for the school district to do, or whether the health department has to go and actually get a court order, assuming a parent would object. I mean, if your kid is tested positive, I would question why you might object, but that's your decision as a parent. Whether the health department has to go get a court order or not, or whether the school, based upon those actual positive cases, has the ability to do that. Question's not been answered by a court. How a court might rule upon that, I'm not going to speculate, but that's a different conversation that has to be had. Also, they now, as a couple of school districts, well, if a kid tests positive, then every kid in the class has to wear a mask for 10 days. I think Chicago's might be the only ones doing this. But all the kids have to wear them. If you're in grade school, you have to put a mask on the whole class. That's, again, not universal masking, you guys. That's not the whole school building having to wear a mask just because. They're trying to say there's a positive case, kids in the class have to wear a mask. Whether or not that is lawful or not, based upon the school district's authority, has not been answered. If and when and how and under what circumstances that might be asked of a court is a separate conversation that I'm not going to talk about on this broadcast, because obviously the governor and all of his little minions will be listening at some point. So I'm just telling you that those policies that those few school districts are putting in place are not akin to what we were dealing with last year. It's not even the same legal question, okay? That's what's going on with schools. So for school districts that aren't doing the universal masking or the exclusion, the courts are letting those schools out of these cases. We've argued that, look, you should still give us a final decision. Otherwise, if the school districts go back to these policies, we're going to have to start these cases all over again. And the courts have universally said, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I could talk about what I think about that, but it doesn't matter. That's what all of the judges in Sangamon County are saying the same thing. We're not going to answer this question on what might be if it comes back. If it comes back, you come see us and we'll address it. But when it comes back, they're talking about a universal mask policy district wide. The separate issue of these this 1 through 5 and 6 through 10 based upon actual positive cases, it's a separate legal question and need to be very careful on how we raise that issue. Okay. The next question is the teachers in the vaccination and testing. It wasn't one of our cases, but there was a case a few months ago to where the appellate court of Illinois said that testing of teachers that don't want to vaccinate is lawful. I don't need to go into why I believe that that was a bad ruling. That was their ruling. And until a different court, higher court, the Supreme Court potentially says otherwise, that's the way that it is. So testing of teachers right now, according to that court, and it's enforceable statewide, is not a violation of the law. We're still waiting in our teacher cases for a ruling because, again, that was a different case. In our case, so we can go to the appellate court and hopefully to the Supreme Court and get a ruling different than the appellate court, because I think the appellate court got it wrong. And when I say they got it wrong, it's not just that I disagree with them. The United States Supreme Court disagrees with them. But that's a federal court, and we're dealing with a state court issue. So the teacher case is still pending. It's going to be pending for some time. In the meantime, if your school district, and again, there's only, to my knowledge, 1 or 2 school districts statewide that are requiring teachers to test if they're not vaccinated. Most school districts have long since abandoned that because it makes sense. But, you know, you've got the Chicago public school system, which is run by a bunch of tyrants, i.e. the Chicago Teachers Union, that are trying to cram these things down the teachers and the children and the parents' throats. So let's talk about the city of Chicago, a little tyrant Mayor Lightfoot, with her policy for vaccination and testing of police officers and firefighters. We're still fighting that case because, quite simply, the document that the city of Chicago says is a policy, it's about as worthless as this piece of paper because it was never formally adopted by the city council or the health department or anybody. It's like a napkin. Legally, it means nothing. The case is still pending. Our case is, but wouldn't you know it, just today, Mayor Lightfoot has come out and said, oh, the vaccination mandate is gone. And I'm reading some of the comments on the sides there, guys. Apologies, make sure I don't miss anything. But Mayor Lightfoot says the vaccination mandate's gone. You don't have to test anymore. Isn't that convenient? God love Mayor Lightfoot. You know, all you hear about is we're in a high COVID transmission right now, and COVID's all over the place, and we've got so many positive cases now, and it's because we're not doing things right. And good old Mayor Lightfoot walks away from her illegal and unconstitutional mandate for vaccine and testing of our public officers. So I can only expect sometime real soon they'll file a motion in our case trying to say that it's moot because the mayor's not enforcing her mandate anymore. But her mandate was always a piece of garbage. Any lawyer in the world knows that it's a piece of garbage, and the mayor probably knows that it's a piece of garbage. So I can only imagine that the pressure, I mean, the union, the Chicago Union, has been doing a pretty good job of fighting on behalf of its members on that mandate. So we're down, what, 2,000 officers in the city right now, and the crime's through the roof because nobody wants to work there. 1, because the mayor's a little tyrant, but 2, they don't want to deal with all of that stress of just trying to do their job and getting a vaccine or a swab shoved up their nose. And so they can't get anybody to come work for them. And, you know, the election's coming, and old J Bob, you know, he wants to make sure that he can do everything he can to look good and try to lie to people now that there's 2 months before the election. So he wants to pretend he's not a tyrant. And so, oh, Mayor Lightfoot just lifted her mandate. God love her. Isn't that great? So, regardless, it's good news for those men and women. There's been a lot of men and women struggling in the city, our public employees. And so, for now, it's gone. Make me Attorney General. It ain't coming back. I promise you. Let's talk about now the Department of Corrections, the state employees. Guys, I'm just here to tell you that AFSCME 31, the union, just absolutely did the worst representation that I could have ever seen on you guys. They did. Was it on purpose? A lot of my clients think so. But, I don't know. But they did a horrible job. They put you guys in such a poor position that it's unbelievable. Negotiating something that wasn't even to be negotiated in the first place. COVID vaccine and testing is a public health issue. It's not a condition of employment issue. We've got courts all over the country. Just recently in Washington, D.C., the judge saying, this is public health. This is not an employment issue. You're at risk for COVID everywhere you walk on the earth. It's not unique to your workplace. But yet AFSCME demanded to bargain over something they should have never demanded to bargain on. And so now, given that there was that arbitration order, that there's a few judges are saying that this is an employment issue. It's not public health. We're still fighting that issue in the appellate courts, even on our case. And, it's not going to get resolved anytime soon. Hopefully, they'll do the right thing now because it's election time, and they'll lift that mandate too. So we'll see what happens. Give you a little bit of an update on Thornley. Remember Jenny Thornley, work comp fraud, Thornley Gate? Kwame Raoul continues to lie on the camera. Flat out lie. That he referred the case to the appellate prosecutor because he's got a conflict. Kwame Raoul doesn't have a conflict under the rules of professional conduct. Kwame Raoul is trying to cover for the governor because his people are implicated directly. So Kwame pretends there's a conflict, and there's not. He pretends he referred the case to the appellate prosecutor who traditionally deals with conflicts. The appellate prosecutor said, we don't know what you're talking about. We've never seen anything. And moreover, if you want us to take this case, you have to ask the court to enter an order. So what happens is if Kwame Raoul truly believes there was a conflict, he would file a motion with the court, asking the court to appoint the appellate prosecutor as conflict counsel because he has a conflict. Two problems why Kwame won't do that, and he's lying to you. There is no conflict. And if he has to file that motion with the court, he has to explain to the judge what his conflict is. He has to say, for these reasons, Judge, I cannot do this case that the Constitution of Illinois and the law says, statute says, I have to prosecute this case on behalf of the people. I can't because there's a conflict. This is what it is, Your Honor. And I need you to appoint the appellate prosecutor to prosecute these people on behalf of the people of the state of Illinois. These citizens should be prosecuted, and I can't do it. You with me? If Kwame puts in there what he says is a conflict, the judge is going to look at him and go, are you kidding me? That's not a conflict, Mr. Raoul. Get out of here. You're not going to get a conflict counsel. And also, who's he going to list that he wants to have charges brought against? Just Jenny Thornley? Can't do that because there's all kinds of people in the governor's office that are implicated in this conspiracy that they would have to be investigated too and potentially charged with a crime. Can you imagine if Kwame Raoul files something that says, I want you to appoint the appellate prosecutor to further investigate and maybe bring charges against Jenny Thornley, Scott Lerner, Ann Spillane, Kevin Ritchie, Governor Pritzker himself, whose names are on these documents of fraud? Can you imagine if that got filed? What would happen? The media in Illinois may actually report on that. I don't know. I sometimes wonder who's, got their thumb on them, but they probably would even report that, right? So that's what's going on with Thornton. In the last month, I've been spending a lot of time up in Chicago. Love Chicago. The inner workings and the political maneuverings are, they should write books about it, make movies. They have made movies about it. But I get into some of the minority communities and I'm like, talk to me. What's going on? You know, one of the main things they want to talk about? The corruption in all the cities that their people are part of. There's a few big topics. I'm not going to talk about all of them tonight, but the corruption. They talk about how these mayors are all corrupt, just like the governor. They just do whatever they want. You know, they think they've got all this power, and the community is powerless to do anything about it, and they'll just take it. So they talk about all these little corrupt communities. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, give me the worst one you got. I got to have a drink. Sorry. Give me the worst one you got. And they give me Miss Henyard from the city of Dalton. She's the worst one. Had multiple citizens tell me this. I've got trustees calling me. And let me give you the short version about Miss Henyard. Miss Henyard is the mayor of Dalton. And Dalton is within, I got to make sure I get these words right, New Thornton Township. So she's also in charge of the township. Think about that. Runs the township, runs the city, one of the cities in the township. You know how much she gets paid in that township position? Over $200,000 a year. $200,000 a year just to be a township supervisor. And since her short term in office, one, she's had now a vote to get a referendum on the ballot to get her thrown out as mayor. She's that bad. You've seen her in the newspaper lately where she had illegal license plates on some cars. So as I understand it from talking to people on the inside, her position as supervisor in township, she has in control of the road money somehow. She used money to buy vehicles. And those vehicles that she bought, she put municipal plates on them, MP plates. But they weren't owned by the municipality. She licensed them that way. So the state came in and took the plates off of them because the plates are illegal. You know, there's a whole political question of why she was spending money they're supposed on the road stuff to buy cars. But you know what? A few of these people told me today that I talked to. They said, Tom, she just does whatever she wants. And you know what she tells us? I'll never get in trouble because Kim Fox is my friend and she'll never prosecute me. That's pretty bold, don't you think? And so one of the things now that's going on is there is a particular person, make sure I'm going to be gender neutral because I don't want to talk about man or woman. It's not because I'm being politically correct. This person who is trying to put a business in the town. Once it was known that he wanted to put this business in it, and our communities, all of our communities, but even in our minority communities, they need businesses, right? They need jobs, they need things to do for the citizens, and etc. So it's a good thing. So this particular person wants to open a business. Once the mayor finds out that this business is wanting to open, she has a little meeting with them and browbeats them about how they should have come to her first before deciding to open a business to see if she was okay with it. And then she commences to telling this person that, oh, by the way, you have an employee that I don't like for political reasons, and you need to fire them. And if you don't fire them, I'm going to make sure you don't get a permit. You think this is the Wild West of the 1800s, wouldn't you? And this person said, I'm sorry, I'm not firing that person. And so then applies for their permits, get their permits issued to them because it should have been issued to them. The mayor finds out about it, and she's trying to take his permits away from him, saying he should have never got them in the first place. Not because of anything in the code that, you know, God forbid, the ordinances that say what you can do and can't do with your property. She says that I'm taking So let me turn to my daughter's trying to call me. 1 second, you guys. The mayor says it's because I didn't approve them. The mayor doesn't approve building permits. Code enforcement approves building permits. But she's trying to take them away from this person because she didn't sign off on them. And again, she didn't sign off on them because he wouldn't fire one of his employees that she finds to be a political enemy. That's what's going on in the city of Dalton with this Mayor Haynard, who I've got tons of documents that have been given to me. This lady is exceeding her authority exponentially more than J.B. Pritzker could even think of doing on a daily basis. And she thinks that she can get away with it because nobody's going to prosecute her like Kim Foxx, and that the good people of Dalton don't have a loud enough voice to do anything but take her threats. And now I've got more people sending me messages because they see that they can trust me. I'm not going to say their names until they tell me they want me to. My computer, my phone is blown up with people all over Cook County saying, Tom, we've got the same stories that are going on in our towns, and we want to talk to you about it. I've got people calling me from state agencies now wanting to talk about the fraud that's going on in their organizations, how contracts are being given to people that don't deserve them and don't qualify for them, but they're being told you will do it or you're going to lose your job. I could spend all of my time as your attorney general prosecuting these people. It's unbelievable because when people send me this stuff and I take an hour to look at them, I can tell whether it's got any meat to it or not pretty quick. There's some that don't. But the one I just gave you in the city of Dalton, it's unbelievable what's going on. You know, and I'll leave you with this with the city of Dalton. Now the mayor, because there's a referendum coming on the ballot to remove her as mayor. She's going around right now trying to collect enough signatures to get some of the trustees that don't support her on the city council, get a referendum against them. So she's out paying for signatures because she's getting $200 some a year taxpayer money, trying to. Hopefully she's not using taxpayer funds. I don't know that to be the case to get these signatures, but she's trying to collect signatures to throw the trustees off because they're pushing back on her saying you can't do all of these things. Remember I told you she's township supervisor? The trustees of the township wanted to have a meeting to talk about what she's doing. She's signing checks without getting proper approval from the township. She locked them out of the township building and said, you can't have any meetings because I'm not letting you in the building. So the trustees had their meeting out in the driveway. So there you go. That's the good city of Dalton mayor. And you know what? I'm not attorney general yet, but I can still take a look at what she's doing, and maybe I'll just find me a client and we'll see what's going on. But I promise you guys, that type of stuff, if I'm the attorney general of the state of Illinois, those are a top priority for me. And Kim Foxx can get out of my way, or I'll put her on the list too. That nonsense is uncalled for. The people in those communities deserve to be treated equally under the law and not be treated the way that this one person was being treated because he wouldn't fire someone for political retribution. Not going to happen if I'm attorney general. People going to jail, I promise you. They better build a bigger jail for these corrupt politicians because they're going to need one. So that's really all that I had for you guys on all of those issues. I'll keep you up to date, like I said, the best that we can. I'll be in Chicago a lot after the holiday weekend. We'll be up in Chicago a lot, still working on these issues. So let me look real quick and see if anybody asked a question that I can answer like I used to do. Let me see here. Casey Hansen says, because ASME is stuck up J-Bob's rear end. That's not what Casey says. And they'll do anything he says and never go against his demands. I understand what you're saying. Let me speak to that, Casey. I'm glad you brought that up. Let me have another drink real quick.
You guys saw me talking about it a little bit. Remember that picture of J Bob with the Carpenters Union? Where there's what? We had 300 of our hardworking apprentices that are trying to get their union cards with the carpenters, all standing there, and you look at the picture, you zoom in on those men, you see the looks on their faces. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? I might be a lawyer now, but I grew up doing I built it. I mean, the house that I live in, I built myself. The pole barns that I have, I built them myself. I know how to build things. I have friends that can do all of that stuff professionally. I've known them my whole life. And let me tell you what, 9 out of 10 of them are not J-Bob lovers. These are hardworking men. They might be Democrats, and that's okay. They're not J-Bob lovers, right? They, you know, the Democrats that are J.B. Pritzkers, they don't have any use for them. And so I knew that picture was nonsense. I knew it was nonsense, and I started asking questions. So I started getting calls from, again, good men telling me the stories about what happened. And then how in Elk Grove, I got to leave you guys with this story. This story is so funny. In Elk Grove, where they had this shindig with J Bob, you know, standing there looking all like, you know, look at my support that I had to pay for, because he pays for all of his support. He didn't have any. They show up at, these men that are in this school show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, get told you got to put these shirts on, the J Bob shirts. And a bunch of them were like, well, we don't want to put those shirts on. What, we got to put that shirt on? We got to go outside? And the response is, well, you know, if you don't do that, they're going to know that you're not outside, and they're going to know you don't have the J-Bob shirt on. And I'm not so sure how that'll go for, you know, getting put out on jobs, and, you know, and you know, the union people support the governor. So they got pressured. Some of them didn't do it, but a lot of them got pressured to put the shirts on to go out there because they were scared what's going to happen to them. It gets better. Oh, yeah, it gets better. Let me have another drink. We have another carpenter apprentice school in Pekin, 2.5 hours from Elk Grove. So where O.J. Bob was at, there was another carpenter's apprentice school that's paid for with taxpayer dollars. They get federal funding, by the way, to teach these men, which is, I have a problem with that. 2.5 hours away. They get to school. They get said, get on the bus. They put on the J-Bob shirt. And they're like, what for? Like, we're going 2.5 hours away to go to this rally for J-Bob. And these men, they were meant to go and, no, we're not doing that. We're here to learn. They come to school to be trained in the art of carpentry. And they get told, get on the bus with the J-Bob shirt. And oh, by the way, if you don't, this is the best part. If you don't get on the bus with the J-Bob shirt, you get an unexcused absence for the day that you got to make up later. Isn't that grand? Isn't that grand? So get on the bus, ride 2.5 hours one way, 5-hour round trip, put on your J-Bob shirt, stand there and look like you support him. And if you don't do that, you're going to be punished, and we're going to put an unexcused absence for you today, that you got to come back on a different day that you could be working, providing for your family when you're not in training, and you make the day up. Yeah. And here's what's interesting. How is it that if those men and women who are there for that training on that day to be trained in the art of carpentry, which is good stuff, that training's great, how is it that you can get credit for training for going to a J-Bob rally? You see what I'm saying? You get 4, as I understand it, 4 weeks a year you have to go through training as an apprentice. So 4 weeks, full time, let's call it 160 hours. Of those 160 hours of training in the art of carpentry, get on the bus and go support J-Bob on this particular day, and we'll give you credit for your training. And if you don't get on the bus, we're going to give you an unexcused absence, and you got to come back and make up the training. Yeah, that's what it takes for old J-Bob to get people to stand there and support him, is threatening these people. See anybody writing about that? Anywhere? No, you didn't see anybody writing about that, did you? Just like when he bussed a 6, you guys saw that too when I took the pictures myself of bussing in 6 bus loads of people into Springfield to the state fair. When they were getting off the bus, these people were handing them the tickets. I saw them handing them the tickets. J. Bob's whole Bud Billiken parade had 10 or 15 people there, walked a block and a half with him, and as soon as they got their little pictures taken, they all leave. Whether that man wins this election or not, it's because he's conning people into thinking that he has support that he does not have. That's the truth. He has no support organically because people believe and committed. Yeah, there's people that support governor, but there's nobody that cares enough about him that they're actually going to use their own time and energy to come out and support him. I'm going to show up to his events. I go to events and there'll be hundreds of people there wanting to talk about how we can help their families and help do things to get this state back on track. They're doing that out of their own time. Because if he wasn't a rich billionaire, nobody would even know who he is. He would be completely unknown in the United States of America if his daddy wouldn't give him $3 billion. But that thing about the carpenters, that peeves me off because those men just want to, and women, I think there might be, I might have seen a few ladies in there. They just want to get an education and get their training and go to work. However they vote, they vote. I don't care who they vote for. They can be Lori Lightfoot, Kim Fox loving voters. I hope not, but they could be. But coercing them into doing that is shameful. If I was in the governor's position, I would tell anybody, if you force somebody to support me, we will no longer get along. And I don't care if you're trying to get them to support me because you want them to. That's wrong. And I would never be involved with anybody. If J.B. Pritzker was any kind of man, and he's not, he's a coward. If he was any kind of man, he would stand out on the stage. What, to the extent the Carpenters Union did that to those men and women, I do not approve. I do not condone it. And it shouldn't happen. That's what he would do if he was a man, but he won't. He'll ignore it just like he ignores everything else. You know, he'll stand there and just spew nonsense out of his mouth, and that's okay. And Kwame Raoul, get me started on Kwame. He's his little lapdog. He is J. Bob's lapdog. It's always going to be his lapdog, begging for money, begging for political favor. He's never going to be his own man. And that's just what the people of Illinois have elected. So that's my soapbox. I'm done. I love you guys. Have a good evening, and I'll talk to you later.